As many of you watching know by now, the issue of voting in these times of COVID is a very contentious one that neither party can agree on. Let me break down the issue before I get into what I think is a viable way to solve it. See, as we know, the Republican Party is against mail-in voting. They say these ballots are very corruptible. Of course, there's little to no evidence to back this claim up other than, trust me bro, but it's what they argue. See, there's no proof other than one-off cases that Republicans use to argue for this point. Many have seen the now notoriously misguided of clip Judge Jeanine Pirro saying that people can register to vote as someone that is dead, which is yet another, complete falsification that the Republican Party uses against mail-in voting. And we also saw subsequently John Oliver shutting her down into oblivion.
Think about the registration records in states that have not been purged. By that I mean dead people have not been removed. You can request an absentee ballot in that name, have it mailed to a different address saying you moved, but you know the person's dead, and then say you're back at the old address and go and vote.
Okay, now, while that might sound plausible to you at first, just think how many steps you'd have to take to successfully make that happen. First, you have to know a dead person. That's hard to do. They're antisocial. Then you have to know that they were registered to vote when they were alive. Then you have to fill out a form to request an absentee ballot be mailed to your address instead of theirs. Now, to do that, you'd likely have to redo their entire voter registration, which would require you to know personal information like their address, date of birth, the last 4 digits of their social security, and possibly their driver's license number and date when it was issued. But okay, let's say that you do all of this and you get their ballot in the mail. You might also have to know what the dead person's signature looks like to convincingly forge it, because it could be compared to their signature already on file. And you had better hope that the notification of their death never reaches the elections office through any of the routes that it could, as despite what Judge Jeanine would have you believe, voter rolls go through periodic list maintenance, including cross-checking social security death records. And having done all of this, and remember, told authorities where you live, if you're caught, you're risking several felonies, which in many states involve prison time, all to gain the grand total of 1 vote. It is a crime that's difficult, high risk, and low reward. It's as if at the end of Ocean's 8, we learned that Sandra Bullock had gone to all the trouble of breaking into the Met Gala to steal a map of state quarters. Sandra, why? That's $12.50 worth of quarters. That's a complete waste of your time, Cate Blanchett's time, and most importantly,
there are some accusations that one may steal ballots out of one's mailbox. The way that the ballot office is going to counter this claim is by instating check-ins where someone who is registered to vote can track their ballot online and see its location, and also, as another security measure, they can see if it was turned in and can request a new one an infinite amount of times if they feel like the old one was fraudulent. On top of this, your signature is cross-checked with the one that you have on file in government records, and it seems very inefficient to me to try and guess what everyone whose ballots you stole as signatures look like and see if they work. As well as this, Republicans take the case of New York, where many ballots had to be discarded because the ballots weren't filled sufficiently. This problem is actually clearly a far more pressing issue than stolen ballots out of your mailbox. The problem with mail-in voting is that if people vote without sufficient credentials, their ballots are ultimately thrown away and their vote doesn't count. At a major scale, like what happened in New York, a change like this could affect the election and could actually cause someone to win or lose the election based on the amount of people who filed their ballots wrong. I think that this is a valid point and can be a serious flaw to the election cycle, and this is one of the key components that I thought about when considering the solution. The Democrats say that we should do universal mail-in voting. This is obviously because we don't want people coming close to one another and don't want them in personal interaction spaces because it could spread COVID-19. And also, we don't want lines of possibly hundreds of people touching the same screen without the screen itself being properly sanitized, because no matter how much you sanitize it, hundreds of people touching a screen is bound to be a health risk. They also know that because of the recent census, the county lines of each state can be heavily gerrymandered by the Republican Party. Usually when Republicans gerrymander elections, it is done to affect low-income or lower-aged areas because those areas find themselves voting Democratic at a much higher rate. Obviously, the Democratic Party is also guilty of this. I'm not just trying to rag on Republicans. These two problems can be easily solved by mail-in voting because there's no 3-hour line to wait for people in low-income areas to vote, and everyone can get access to their ballots easily. Democrats are heavily against voting in person because they know that regardless of precautions, the people who want to vote Democrat may not take the risk of getting sick, and they know that the voter base of the Republican Party will probably take that risk because the party has been pushing the idea that the virus isn't that serious, but that's a topic I covered in an old video already, so if you want to go watch that, please do, it would help me out a lot. However, the biggest issue the Democrats want to end is the defunding of the post office by the Trump administration. The Trump administration withheld money that the post office needs to get all the ballots out to the people in mail-in form, and has actively actually made their lives harder by throwing away mail sorting machines and other machines that aid the people at the post office and would ultimately help those people do their jobs. Since the Republican Party is in power right now, there is very little that the Democrats can do about it. At the end of the day, people just want to be able to vote. They don't want their election day possibly pushed back, and they don't want infringement of their civil liberties either. They just want a system in which they can vote. This balance is hard to strike. Of course, I am more in the Democratic camp in saying that mail-in voting should be available easier to anybody who wants it, but we can all see that there's clearly an issue and a disagreement, and the validity of either side's point can be argued, but at the end of the day, both parties are calculated in what they say and why they say it, and there's clearly no changing their opinion, so there has to be a compromise that has to be struck. The solution is a systematic week-long method to get all voters who want to vote a chance to do so. The way that this would work is we would give everyone who is registered to vote a time slot on a certain day in a span of 7 days or a week. There will be mask mandated polling stations, and the polling workers will sanitize the screen and area before everyone submits their ballot in the ballot booth. This would tackle the main issues that everyone faces. For one, the lines would be socially distanced outside with people wearing masks, so the amount of people that would get sick from COVID would be very low. For another point, this is a form of in-person voting that satisfies the Republican agenda. For another, it makes sure that districts are less susceptible to long waiting lines as a set amount of people vote at a certain time every day for a week, and lines will take the same amount of time in a rich neighborhood and a poor neighborhood, so there's no possibility of people not voting because the lines will take too long. This is a good compromise both sides can make, and I believe it to be by far the best solution to the problem at hand. Of course, there's one main issue with this solution too. How will people get to the polling stations? We know that people have jobs and other important things going on in their lives, so getting to the polling station and finding time to do so may be difficult for some people. The way we counteract this is by mandating the government give each voter a slip of paper that allows them to leave work for 90 minutes while the person goes to vote at their nearest polling station. So now let's talk about transportation. To get to the polling stations, busing can be expanded, and more polling stations in general can be opened nearer to the people that might need it. This election issue can be very easily solved if both sides wanted to, and I think that my solution is one that's very good. So now I've given my solution, and now it's time to hear your recommendations. Leave your ideas about how we should vote in the comments below, and as always, thank you guys for watching, and have a great night.